I call to order this select board meeting at 6 o'clock on Monday, February 27th, 2023. This meeting is a hearing which will cover the articles that are voted on Australian ballot, on the ballot for town meeting. But first, is there anyone who is here for opening comment?
Yeah, just as a point of record, it is 6:06.
Yes, it is 6:06. Hearing none and seeing none, we move on to the hearing itself and the informational hearing. Dan Mance, our town moderator, is here to pay attention to the agenda and the articles that are before us.
Thank you. Should I go ahead and read the instructions for the night if nobody is here? Or
we are
officially in session?
We are in session, okay. And this is public record.
Okay.
And so we can convene and progress in our presentation.
Well, let me give a few opening comments on the conduct of tonight's hearing. My name's Dan Mans. I live on the Pleasant Valley Road, and I'm currently the elected moderator for the town of Underhill. Tonight's gathering is a hearing, and while this is technically a meeting of the Underhill Selectboard, these kind folks have asked me to moderate for tonight. Having a moderator enables our elected officials to most effectively do their task, which is to hear from or listen to the voters in town about articles that will be voted on by Australian ballot on March 7th. Hopefully, if you have some questions about the Australian ballot items to be voted on, this is also an opportunity to seek information or clarifications. Tonight's hearing is a requirement of Vermont statute 17 VSA section 2680 requires the select board to hold a public hearing on all Australian ballot questions within 10 days of when the voting will occur. We're now 8 days away from our town meeting, when the voting will happen at the Browns River Middle School between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. So I believe we're in compliance with that provision of the law. A helpful document for tonight's meeting and next week's town meeting is this year's annual report for the town of Underhill. That publication is available online or in hard copy at the town offices, Jacobs Market, the Wells Market, or the Deborah Rawson Memorial Library. Page 1, after the table of contents, contains the official warning of this year's town meeting, including 3 Australian ballot questions. So why do we have this hearing for only Australian ballot items? Good question. As a taxpayer, we all deserve to have a full understanding of what we are voting on. When you step into the ballot box, your opportunity to get questions answered is already behind you. This law requires, this is why the law requires a hearing in advance of voting. By contrast, the general fund budget, the highway fund budget will be discussed, debated, and voted on in front of the full town meeting. It would not be proper to discuss Australian ballot items at the town meeting when some people will already have cast their vote. Likewise, it isn't proper to discuss town meeting items in this forum when voters have the expectation that the consideration of those articles will be fully explored on the floor at town meeting. Didn't we discuss the general fund and highway fund budgets in last year's public hearing? The answer is yes, we did. And that was done because the general fund and highway fund budgets for the last 2 years, I believe, were voted by Australian ballot due to the COVID pandemic. For health reasons, we were not able to meet in person on town meeting day. So for those 2 matters that we have traditionally voted from the floor needed to be moved to Australian ballot. So why did one article about an excavator and a second one about a trailer end up as Australian ballot questions? These two items involve borrowing money for a period not to exceed 5 years. So that's the logic of why these are presented for Australian ballot voting. Article 6 is for the election of town officers and school directors. While this is an Australian ballot item, it will not be discussed at tonight's hearing. This is not a forum for campaign speeches or discussion of candidates. And if you are interested in seeing a sample ballot, those are available on the town website, at the Jacobs Market, at the town hall, or the Underhill Center post office. So a few items about the conduct of tonight's hearing. No voting is happening tonight. So accordingly, we do not need motions or seconds to introduce the two articles we will be addressing. Similar to the town meeting, please address any questions or comments you have to me, the moderator. This will help keep the conversation orderly and keep us from straying into back and forth dialogue between parties. I'll do my best to route the questions to the appropriate person for an answer. When you speak, please identify yourself by name, and if you wish, address of where you live, even if you've already introduced yourself from speaking before. This is a big help for the folks taking notes and for those who may not have a camera and be able to see you. So it would be something like, hi, I'm Dan Mans from Pleasant Valley Road, and I'd like to have the following question answered. Will persons attending tonight who are not voters in the town of Underhill, please identify yourselves by raising your hands. I think right now probably everybody here is a voter in Underhill. Only the voters in Underhill are eligible to raise questions or make comments at this hearing. We will continue our tradition of allowing non-voters who may be in a position to answer questions, town employees or others, to answer questions. Please limit any questions or comments you have on an article to 3 minutes, and if appropriate, we'll attempt to get an answer for questions, and then we can have some brief follow-up if needed. If several people want to weigh in on a particular subject, I'll take people in the order I see hands raised. Once everyone who wishes to speak about a particular matter has had a chance to do so, I'll go back to the original speaker and allow up to another 3 minutes if needed. Folks who are attending virtually, I'll try to keep an eye on the screens and look for raised hands. You can also type a question if you have one into the chat box, and I'll try to pick them up there. If you would like to speak but don't have a camera or don't wish to be seen, you can also, I think you can raise your hand. Yeah, you can raise your hand over there on the react icon. And we have an hour for tonight's hearing, and hopefully that will be plenty of time to get everyone's questions answered and explore your comments. If we run out of questions and comments, I think we will stay here for the remainder of the hour because that was what was warned in case anyone joins us late. Okay, so there's some opening remarks on the agenda for this evening. And then I think to begin things, we would start with Article 7. And I will read Article 7. Shall the voters authorize the purchase of an excavator to replace the 1997 excavator and borrow an amount not to exceed $286,000 for a term not to exceed 5 years pursuant to 24 VSA Section 1786, paragraph A, subparagraph B. So are there any opening remarks on that article from anyone here?
I did a little research if the audience is interested in hearing, and if Dan, you'll allow, I can just
Please do.
Speak to the excavator a little bit. So the excavator, the model is a Caterpillar 311B. During the year of 97, we had significant flooding in town, town-wide spread. So that it's my understanding that the town rented an excavator from Southworth Milton Cat in 97 and 98, actually in 98. And the idea was they were going to rent the excavator with the intent to purchase it from Southworth Milton. So in March of 98, they formed an agreement with Southworth Milton and rented it for $3,900 a month for a period of 3 months. And then that rental fee went to the purchase of the excavator, which was $66,000. So a little background on the excavator. It's a 79 horsepower excavator, has a 1 cubic yard bucket. It's a 26,000 pound machine, so it's a fairly substantial machine. The total operating hours that are on the machine to date are 10,626. That's a lot of hours for a machine of that age. And basically, if you did the math and divided the 10,626 hours into the 26 years that we've used it, it equivalates to about 400 hours per year of use. So we do use the excavator quite a bit. I have a little bit of, I don't have all of the maintenance records for the excavator, but I do know in 2001, the machine sustained major water damage when it was submerged in the water and the motor was replaced. In 2010, the tracks were replaced and all idlers and drive sprockets were replaced. We reused the track pads. This is information according to the road foreman. In May of 2017, the track and the frame had some repairs done. Shortly after, the seals and the gaskets on the lifting rods, track adjusters, swing brake repair, travel pressure sensor was all worked on. The most substantial work we've done was last year when the hydraulic pump was rebuilt and the pump drive replaced, the swing brake pressure switch and hoses on the boom cylinders. So we put about $13,000 in repairs into it in 2021. And that's about all the records I have from the excavator. I do say that we perform routine ditch work with the excavator as part of our municipal roads general permit. We're required to ditch and stone line, so we do a lot of that work ourselves. So the road crew does a lot of that work themselves. The culverts are replaced on a regular basis. Usually around 15, 16 culverts a year are replaced. So we use the excavator for that. Ditching, several substantial road rebuild projects have been done as well with the excavator. So it's had a good long life. And I did do a little research on excavators, used excavators of that year. I would say I could not find one that had as many hours as our machine does. A lot of them were about half or in the 8,000 range hours. So we have quite a few hours on our machine. Probably worth in the $25,000 range, $20,000 to $25,000 range as it sits.
Okay, thank you.
We do have one person, Pat Savalas, has joined us online here.
Welcome. Glad you could join us. So let me stay on Article 7 then for a moment and ask if there are any questions from anyone in attendance tonight. about Article 7 or any other comments from anybody about Article 7?
We'll just let Pat know that her microphone is on.
Oh, yeah, Pat, your microphone is on, and if you could mute yourself, great. That'll just keep us from hearing the background noise. And Kurt Johnson is here. I saw your hand raised. Come on up, you can sit.
Kurt Johnson from Mountain Vista Road. One question I have is, let's say this does not pass for whatever reason.
Mhm.
I think it's likely it will, but just in case it doesn't, and the old one is deemed to be no longer usable for whatever reason, let's say it just dies on us, and we don't want to sink the money to repairing it. If we're not approved, then they're unable to go purchase a machine. So the alternatives would be rent, like we did 25 years ago. I don't know what that price is today if we wanted to do that. I suspect it's a lot more than $4,000 a month. Probably up to.
You able to confirm that's the
I would say
the
that-
backup arrangement?
Well, first of all, I think we would just keep running the excavator until we couldn't any longer.
Right. Well, we have commitments to do roadside ditching for the MRGP work.
We do.
So if we got into trouble, the voters denied access to purchasing a new one for this year. Again, we have commitments for MRGP work and such forth that would force us to have to probably go rent.
Rent or either
Hire it out.
sub it out.
Yeah.
Yep.
Of
It
course,
it would
that,
be, if we needed the work done and
Yep.
we didn't have equipment, we would have to rent some equipment and
Yep.
find that money within the budget.
So that's where I was getting at. So let's say it does not pass for any reason. Then would it be prudent for someone in the audience to raise their hand and say, in case it doesn't pass, should we allow the select board X dollars for contract work or whatever rental?
I don't think that would be, well,
Can you do, legitimately, can we do that? Or do
So
you have to wait till after the vote and then consider it?
it would be awkward, I believe. You could amend the budget from the
Understand.
floor. You could add some amount of money to the
Yeah.
budget that amendment would have to be voted by the voters
On the floor.
on the floor. And then the challenge would be, I believe, that the town would then collect that money in
Tax.
taxes, whether you're not going to know whether the article passes or not. And so you'd end up with
Correct.
extra money in the budget.
Which,
Well, what would happen, I believe, is that if the article passes, then that is added to the budget when we
Yes.
set the tax rate. So really, adding money on the floor for covering the case, it's kind of like doubling up on, double dipping on the
Not
tax.
quite. I mean, if it passes, yes, it gets added in. If it doesn't pass, now you're in a position where you can just
I don't
run
think you
beyond
can,
the budget.
I don't think that would fly. We have to pass a budget when we walk out the door. So it's either in there or it's not. There's no contingent.
Correct. And that's what I'm kind of asking the question about is I'd have to say, let's add $30,000 to the budget for rental or contracting out an excavator and recognize that if it does pass, then we add an extra
I
30,
would
40,000 to
hope-
the tax base, which would then go to surplus, presumably.
I am not a heavy equipment technician. However, I would hope, being the owner of old cars and
Mhm.
putting money in them and
Likewise.
keeping them going for a month or two or months or quarters, I would think that we would be able to, do the repair thing and keep it on the road for a year when we could reapproach the voters.
Yes, but this is a 1997 rig and parts supply sometimes isn't always what you'd hope it to be, which could be something breaks and it's going to be months before you can get that part. The season by which Nate has to do this work is limited. And again, I don't know how contractually we are obligated to do MRGP work each year, but I know we've got a line item in the budget for some work that we plan to do this year. And it's a pretty stiff amount of money. I think it's like 25,000 for culverts up on Logan Settlement Road. So I'm just concerned that if it doesn't fly, I mean, one option is just overspend the budget. You could do that, right? That is the select board's option. But
I would hope that, you would be able to run it for this season. I would expect you'd be able to run the machine for the season until you figure it out again. The one point I think that's important to understand is, since this item is on Australian ballot, it is not in the budget. So until it passes, then it will show up in the budget as a long-term liability with the loan payment.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
And I don't know when the first payment would be due
following year.
the following year, so that it would not really have much impact on this fiscal year's budget. But I would think that we would need to, it is functioning now.
Mhm.
And I think that we would need to trust that we could get some more work out of it. And obviously, we don't know the wait time.
Okay. Yeah, we have a hand raised online, and I recognize Bob Stone.
Thanks,
You
Dan.
can please.
I believe we wouldn't be the first town that would ever face the fact that a ballot item initiative would fail. I feel that if in the event that were to happen, that we certainly have the ability, if we ran into a problem with the excavator, that we could call a special meeting if we had to have a special election or a special vote or something like that. If we couldn't find the money somewhere else in our budget, that we certainly would have the opportunity to go back to the residents and the taxpayers and advise them if we needed more money to hire it out or rent a machine or whatever the case may be. So I think that that would be our fallback position, and I hope that we all keep our fingers crossed that the initiative passes.
Kurt, yeah, as moderator, let me not put any words in your mouth, but what I also hear you saying is this is a very important item, and you're encouraging people to vote for it.
I guess, yes.
Okay.
I mean, it's a 25-year-old machine, and we do need to replace it. It doesn't necessarily say we're going to replace it with a new one. It says we're going to spend up to $286,000 on an excavator, whether it's new, used, whatever. That's fine, but we do need to have something that I think we can
Count on.
count
The
on.
warning does clearly state, shall the voters authorize the purchase of an excavator to replace the 1997
Right.
excavator.
A purchase, not necessarily a new one.
Well, that's correct.
Maybe
A replacement.
Maybe we get a good deal on a used.
A replacement. Well,
Yes.
exactly. There's options, I suppose. with
Okay,
things
so
within.
it sounds like the select board feels comfortable with the situation as it is, and there's no need for me to raise a hand and say, let's add 30,000 to the budget just in case.
I think that would complicate things more than we would want to.
Okay.
And I think it would raise, in some sense, just doing that, I think, raises the issue in town meeting, which Dan Mance just told us is not allowable.
Right.
Because we can't really
That's why I'm asking the question.
talk about, and it would, putting that on the floor might say to people who haven't voted yet on their Australian ballot, make sure you vote for this, which we cannot do. So even subtly, that kind of move would be.
So let's try and stay focused on Article 7 as it is, not sort of wade off into speculation about what might or might not happen.
Correct.
You know, I think
We need to be really
cautious
careful.
about that.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming down. Are there any other comments or questions? Somebody else have a hand? Oh, yeah, Pat Sabalas. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that there's an issue with having the select board advocate positions prior to the town meeting, but I wonder whether the select board or perhaps the Highway Infrastructure Committee could post something on Front Porch Forum explaining why the town needs a new excavator in neutral terms without necessarily advocating. And I'm just putting that out there for you to think about. I know years ago when we had a complicated set of questions, Australian ballot questions, we drafted a fairly substantial explanation to the voters as to why the town was doing each of these things. So I just throw that out there. You have a week, perhaps you would like to post something that explains to all the people who aren't in this meeting why you need one. That's it.
Thank you very much. Other thoughts on Article 7?
I didn't hear your answer her question. Is it okay for an article to go in Front Porch Forum?
Not my position as moderator to comment on that.
Okay.
I would not feel comfortable as a select board member or as the select board to campaign. However, the forum is a public forum, and if public wish to comment, I mean, there may be somebody who comments against it, but that's the public, and they can do that. So it would be appropriate for public to be able to do that.
Hang on, Pat's ballots. I see you raise your hand again.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that the select board would campaign. I know that that's an issue. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just suggesting that you explain that we have this old excavator and it's hard to get parts, et cetera. Explain the reasons why the town wants to buy it or wants to buy a new one. So it's just something I guess you need to talk with Sherry or your lawyer if you were inclined to do it. Or, as you say, perhaps a workaround is a member of the public explain why and advocate for the purchase of a new excavator.
It seems to me like it would do no harm to state the facts, like I just stated about the history of the excavator, and to educate the public about how much we use the excavator and let them draw their own conclusions.
And I think we can explain why we voted yes to put it on the ballot to be voted on. We can explain our decision. Like you said, very factual. This is the reason why we need a new excavator and a trailer. I think it's a good suggestion by Pat.
And it's now the appropriate time to ask the question of what other options were considered? Or is that not something we can bring out the beat meeting?
What other options other than purchase of or expenditure of up to $286,000? Is that what you're referring to? Yeah, I think you could ask the select board what other options were considered.
And if I could just add, I know in the past when we explained some of the ballot issues, we explained how, say, if the town voters approve purchase of a new excavator, how that would impact their tax rate or their taxes. You remember that, Kurt? For a number of those, when we had to borrow for a number of things, we explained what the impact would be, and it's most of the time wasn't huge.
So let's go back to Kurt's original question. I don't know if there's any institutional memory of what else was considered, what other options were.
I don't think that it's logical for a town to own an excavator, especially when you look at these numbers as to how much it's used. It's an essential piece of equipment, not only in general maintenance, but especially in an emergency when we need it. So I I don't recall that there was any discussion about doing anything else but replacing what is old and ailing, possibly ailing in the future. And I don't know if either of my colleagues remember any discussion about that, but I would defer to you.
I think that's an accurate characterization.
Mm-hmm.
It's a piece of equipment that's used in the normal day-to-day business of the construction season.
Okay, Pat Sabalis, you missed all the instructions here, see, so I'll let you speak one more time on this issue. Go ahead.
I didn't know I raised my hand again, but
It is.
I don't know
Sorry.
that I don't know that the general public understands how much the town uses an excavator. I mean, I never see the excavator, so I wouldn't think I would think it's just this piece of equipment that the road crew likes to have around, and it's getting rusty. So, I mean, like Brad said, just a statement of the facts. We have a 1997 excavator, and we use it for this, 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 and this, and explain why a new one is required. That's all. Thank you, and thank you for being forgiving of my failure
No
to
worries.
follow procedure.
We do have a large crowd tonight, so.
So I don't think it's any different from when we borrow a truck or we put a truck on the ballot for $205,000 or $208,000, and everybody knows why we need a truck, I suppose. So in like suit, we could do the same with the excavator. Yeah, just a little more education.
Yeah. Well, I think, part of this is that answers to that question is exactly why you're having this meeting tonight, so that could be explained.
Yeah, this is going to be like buying a truck and a half, because instead of a $40,000 a year for 5 years, it's going to be more like $75,000 a year for 5 years.
Yeah.
So it'll be noticed in the budget.
Right. Okay. Other questions, thoughts on Article 7, or shall we move on to Article 8? No additional comments I'm seeing on Article 7. Article 8 reads, shall the voters authorize the purchase of a trailer to replace the 2005 trailer used for mobilizing heavy equipment and borrow an amount not to exceed $45,000 for a term not to exceed 5 years pursuant to 24 VSA Section 1786, Paragraph A, Subparagraph B. Floor is now open for any questions, comments, observations about Article 8.
I could just give a little background about the trailer.
Please do.
If you'd like.
Please do.
So we've been told, due to the condition of the trailer, which is essential for moving the excavator, and that's its primary function, moving the excavator, will not pass, the trailer will not pass inspection next year. So it was inspected one more time without a serious amount of work, tires, probably some frame repair. It will not pass inspection. So this is the reason the trailer is on the warning is to move. If we purchase an excavator, we need a way to move it.
Got it.
Otherwise, you'd have to pay for that service, which is quite costly. And then it doesn't give us the flexibility of moving it when we need to, especially if there's an emergency situation. I'll use an example. Silly Hill, a culvert collapsed just after the school bus went over it in the fall. It was a large 24-inch culvert, big hole in the road. It needed to be replaced immediately. So the road crew that day, the culvert collapsed that morning. The road crew was up there by before noon, mobilized the excavator there, had the culvert there. They also bring the culvert to the site. They may use the trailer for that. So they were there on site, repaired the culvert, and the road was open that day.
Good example. Thank you.
Do we know if that trailer was purchased at the same time that we purchased the excavator at 1997?
No, it's a 2005 trailer.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure what we did before that. I don't have any real background on the trailer itself. I couldn't find any information on that. But I do know, just based on what Nate has told me, that it will not pass inspection
One more time.
one more time, and it will cost probably, half of what we're talking about here to get it inspectable.
For repairs. Yeah. Okay. Floor is now open for questions or observations, suggestions about Article 8.
I think Pat has her hand up again.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Or
Yeah,
she
Pat,
maybe
you
doesn't.
still have your hand up, or I don't know if you can turn that thing off. It's still showing you haven't. Okay, there we go. Bob Stone, you got a thumbtack up there too. Right? Okay. Any other thoughts, comments, suggestions on Article 8? Okay. Then I think we are through Article 7 and Article 8, which was the business we needed to conduct this evening. And I think maybe we can just stay here for a few more minutes and make sure nobody signs in late and has any further comments or questions for us.
Can I follow up on the question that Pat raised about doing a post on Front Porch Forum?
Of course.
What do you think about doing that, Dan and Bob, about putting just a factual summary of why we're putting this on the ballot for vote, so people have some information regarding it?
I think it would be okay if it was worded objectively. I would like to vet that, however, and perhaps it could come by way of other announcements about different things in the town, like from the town administrator, and as an objective, matter of fact kind of thing, which would not be seen as persuasive, but that would, I think, there would be a value in getting that vetted.
Bob, what do you think?
I think the explanation that Brad provided at the beginning was adequate and could very well be, drafted into something that could be published for, the residents to see.
Brad, would you feel comfortable putting something together?
Oh, definitely. And I could draft something up and then go over it with Nate, make sure we got my facts straight. Keep it very simple and
Exactly.
just more or less education about
Yep.
why it's necessary to have such a piece of equipment. Be helpful.
Do it
And
for
then-
both the excavator and the trailer.
Exactly, and then let people draw their own conclusions. So we don't need to advocate either way. It's
Just
just
explain it,
just
exactly.
explain the facts.
And it is true that this is part of the public record, this hearing, but there may be a lot of people, there likely is going to be a lot of people who do not access this meeting.
Correct.
And this would give the citizenry just another opportunity from the town in an objective way.
Right.
We voted to have these articles on there. It's not like, we're not in favor of it. I mean, it's, and most of the time when I'm voting, I take that into consideration and the thought that goes behind the articles. But I think an explanation, on Pat's suggestion is probably good.
Keeping my moderator hat on here, I would say that you would be wise to address both Articles 7 and 8.
Yes.
Don't pick one versus the other.
That would be,
Do
Do both.
keep
both.
it objective.
Keeping it very objective, just the sort of the facts. I think on the positive side, I never have heard a complaint about elected officials giving the public too much information. And so I think, getting the background behind these two articles in front of the public is not an irrelevant suggestion.
Mhm.
Other thoughts about Article 7 or Article 8? Anything else? We'll wait just a few more minutes to see if anyone else appears.
You can adjourn at 7, right?
Mhm. Thank you much.
Good night.
Thanks, Kurt.
Thank you, Kurt.
Well, later.
Thanks, Kurt. See you.
I have 6:47 on my clock here. I think if we stay till 6:50 and nobody else is here, we can probably move forward to adjournment if you wish at that time.
And the hearing's always been about an hour. You said.
Say it depends on the what's on Australia ballot. If there were 10 or 12 items, we'd want a lot more time.
Mhm.
So I just took my best guess.
And I think the last couple of years, we were doing the meeting, also had the select board budget and the highway budget.
That would be
and
true.
So there was a broader range of subjects to talk about.
And it was popular.
And it was popular, right?
So, but in essence, back to the law about the reason for this hearing, it makes perfect sense.
Right.
Because no one basically could get any knowledge of what they're voting for without, this is their chance to ask questions.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so they understand what they're voting for when they go in the ballot box. So I now have 6:50 on my clock, and I would say attendance is eroding at this meeting rather than expanding.
I move that we adjourn. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes carry this motion 3-0.
Thank you very much.
We are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
6:51.